As the country prepares for the September 1 general and regional elections, this week we focus on a party making a renewed bid for national leadership as an independent party, the Alliance for Change. Now contesting as an independent party, the AFC has re-emerged under the leadership of Attorney-at-Law Nigel Hughes. After parting ways with its former coalition partner, a Partnership for National Unity, the AFC says it is returning to its roots, bringing back the spirit and drive that once positioned it as a strong third force in Guyanese politics. With a campaign centered on inclusive governance, economic diversification, and modern infrastructure, the party is promising a fresh approach to leadership and national development. This week in Sources, we sit down with Mr. Hughes to explore the party's vision, priorities, and the path it hopes to chart for the country's future. Good evening and welcome to another edition of Sources, where we bring you closer to the people, ideas, and issues shaping our nation's future. I'm your host, Svetlana Marshall. Tonight's guest is Attorney-at-Law Nigel Hughes, the leader of the Alliance for Change and also AFC's presidential candidate. Mr. Hughes, thank you so much for coming.
Good evening. Thank you for being here, Svetlana. I've always had difficulty, so please forgive me. Thank you for having me.
How have you been?
I've been good. I'm getting to see lots of parts of the country that I've seen before, but I enjoy going to, so it's been good.
And how is the campaign going?
Campaign is going okay. Going good. We've had very, very good responses at a personal level whenever we move around, so it's been very encouraging.
Now, on nominations day, you said something. You said that this is the return of the AFC. In fact, you said the AFC is back, and you referenced to 2011. What exactly you meant by that? Okay,
well, you know that several persons, including prominent politicians, have been pronouncing on the death and the burial of the AFC. They said we were dead. Some people predicted it. And after the 2020 elections had concluded, people thought that the AFC, especially as it separated and went its own way, was no longer a force to be reckoned with. And every day, various people would write and say these things. So when on nomination day, we had a very decent turnout of our supporters and members. All decked out in the party colors, and we of course made an impact, I believe. Before that, we've been making an impact. God has been good. Since we had a new executive in July, I think we have made a significant impact. We've been leading, certainly in the Recommendations and Ideas Forum, so I was happy to be in a position where I can say we're back. The reference to 2011 was a reference to the original core values of the AFC. When I got elected, I did say I considered my mandate a mandate to rediscover the core values of the Alliance for Change and to establish those values and, of course, re-establish the Alliance for Change. So that's why I referred to 2020. 2020 was our best individual outing at an election. I think we got 8 seats, or 7 in
2011.
Yeah. And so we've returned to where we were. We are running alone. We are the Alliance for Change, and we stand on those core principles. New vision.
On reflection, do you see the move in 2015 to coalesce with the APNU as an act of betrayal for those who believe in the core principles that the AFC put forward when it started in 2005, and then the election was in 2006? So answer that first, and then I'll put the other question.
Betrayal is a very strong negative term. I'm not sure that I would use the term betrayal. I would say a lot of our supporters were disappointed that, given our prior statements where we said we would run alone, we had asserted an independence, and we had identified some core principles which we would not deviate from. When in 2015 the party coalesced, there were significant parts of our membership who were concerned. Some people actually left. And then, of course, between 2015 and 2020, there were other developments where people were, again, not happy with. So I would say that hindsight is always 2020. Is always 2020. I would not say a betrayal, but I certainly would say there were people who were disappointed. What I would like to say is this: in 2015, if we remember what was happening, like today, the level of corruption with the PPP was significant. The level of arrogance displayed by the PPP, the level of lack of consultation with anybody else, and the hubris that was around. I think it's the same as it is today. So we really, as a party then, I was not involved in the negotiations, but I think one of the primary considerations then was how do you rein in this unwieldy beast, literally, that had run wild with a constitution that gives absolute power to the ruling party. And at the time, I think the view was of the majority of the leadership that we should coalesce.
So while there were persons who were disappointed, there were some who were actually happy that the two sides
absolutely.
had coalesced. So in 2015, the AFC and the APNU merged to form a coalition. Of course, we know the history, very successful at the elections. However, in 2020, they lost according to GCOM. Now, 2025, there were some persons, supporters of both sides, who had hoped that the two sides would have coalesced once again. What would you say to persons who really were of the opinion that the partnership would have resulted in a better chance, the two parties having a better chance of unseating the People's Progressive Party?
Sure. I just wanted to touch on something about 2015. 2015, the margin wasn't that big. You know?
No,
it was 5,000 votes. So it wasn't as if it was a runaway victory. It was a very narrow margin. And that, to me, said a lot. It meant significant parts of the country did not vote for the coalition, and therefore, again, perhaps the approach should have been different, but that's for another discussion. I know that there are significant numbers of people who have expressed disappointment that the APNU and the AFC have been unable to arrive at a consensus. I'll try to put this as best I can. Our approach to these discussions was based on policy and program. We had 3 negotiators. 2 of them were the surviving founder members of the Alliance for Change, Mr. Ramjitan and Mr. Trotman. And then we had Mr. Stewart from Jamaica. And the PNC had an equally competent team. Mr. Hales led Ganesh Mahipal and Sherwood Lowe. And my understanding from the reports that we got was that the APNU's single agenda item was that they should have the leadership. They had no other position that was advanced. The discussions went on in fits and starts. My understanding is, again, we proposed that we identify a criteria, a set of methodologies and principles that would identify which candidate would be the best candidate to deliver a victory to the coalition. They rejected that. They said that their party had given a specific mandate to their negotiators, which was that their candidate should be the candidate, irrespective of what the polls or other scientific methods might show. Those discussions kind of waned. We then said, look, why don't we identify a consensus candidate? Since the PNC is the larger party and it has concerns about whether that candidate should come from the People's National Congress, we said, you've got Mr. Carl Greenwich, eminently qualified, long in the business, outstanding diplomat. He is just one of many. We had an MOU which was going to expire on March 31st. Before it expired, I removed myself from even being a potential presidential candidate and say, look, let's find a presidential candidate. I threw out the name when questioned. I said, Terence Campbell, Dr. Terence Campbell. And those were rejected. The PNC's position was that they didn't believe in the business of consensual candidates. They didn't know what consensual candidates bring. I met with Mr. Norton on a one-on-one, and again, their position was that he should be the candidate. Those negotiations were going on. We actually reached a stage where we had proposed, the Alliance for Change said, fine, we accept you, Mr. Norton, as the presidential candidate. We actually said that. It was probably in my phone. We'll identify the prime ministerial candidate, but the lead of the list has to come from the Alliance for Change, because, you know, anybody that has the presidency and also has the lead of the list, effectively, they could remove anybody. They cannot appoint anybody despite having a coalition agreement. And we've had unfortunate experiences between 2015 and 2020 where what was agreed on was not carried out. So we said we wanted that, and I think we said Minister of Finance. They came back and he said completely unacceptable, and that came to an end. While that was going on, I had my suspicions that they were engaged with the triumvirate of the Alliance for Change, Ms. Fernandes, Mr. Duncan, and Mr. Ramsaroop. And in the middle of those discussions, they had their arrangements, they left. And then Mr. Norton, I think in an interview, I can't remember who, might have been on, can't remember, David Hines or one of them, confirmed that since 2022, he and my predecessor, Mr. Ramjachan, had arrangements about coalitions, and I had identified people for various positions. None of this was made known to me when I took over, and of course I had a different approach, and we had a new administration. So whatever arrangements there were going on in the background, and we are where we are today. It is what it is.
So, yeah. So you've since moved on. The party's list has been approved. It's now one of 6 parties contesting the September 1 general and regional elections. Tell me a bit about your candidates.
Okay. Perhaps I will tell you about the candidates, but perhaps my preferred approach would be to say this. We accept as a fundamental principle that none of the political parties, People's Progressive Party, People's National Congress, APNU, WIN, none of them has the human resources that can fill all the cabinet positions. For the Alliance for Change, that is our primary position. So if and when elected, our approach is going to be, where do we find the best talent in the country to not only people the ministries, but to surround those that head those ministries with the best advisors in the specific area. So I say that as the backdrop. For example, and the easiest one is foreign affairs and border issues, particularly with Venezuela. That is perhaps the greatest challenge to our integrity as a country. The best qualified people need to be there. So obviously Mr. Greenidge would be a person I would engage immediately if I were to be elected, to find out from him how he recommends we approach this, how he recommends heading up the foreign affairs, how it be structured, and for him to identify a role, a leadership role, which he would play, because his reputation and performance speaks for itself. There's some outstanding people there. Dr. Riyadh Intinali, who was formerly ambassador to the U.S., David Hills from the People's National Congress, and I'm sure in the People's Progressive Party there are people who would be eminently qualified, because we can't play with the border. It's not a political issue, and we need to harness the best skills. We have to go into the diaspora and find those people who are specifically gifted. So that's foreign affairs. The economy. We have a lot of revenue, but managing the economy and growing the non-oil economy, which is frightfully important. Our emphasis is not so much on the Minister of Finance, but the Economic Advisory Commission or Council, which we will create to advise and guide policy. We will have a commission that will plan, National Development Commission, which will plan the future of this country in 10 to 15-year periods. Coming back, however, to the candidates, very, very happy to have Jaipal Sharma on board with us. He was, as you know, Deputy Minister of Finance during the coalition time. We have Kerry Graves-Zandy with us. I think Cathy Hughes, irrespective of her relationship with me when she was Minister of Public Telecommunications, the development of the ICT industry was extremely well done. Similarly, someone like David Patterson. For youth, we've got Devin Sears, who's been an MP now for at least one sitting. Certainly for youth, sports and culture, and I can talk on that if you wish. I mean, I could just go on with the list.
And you have your prime ministerial candidate.
Well, I was going to come to her. I mean, Laura is, by any stretch of the imagination, an exceptional candidate to have. We are extremely lucky. Laura has a long history, not just in indigenous rights, women's rights. She has represented the indigenous community at several international fora, is extremely strong, brings not only that experience, but brings a freshness and approach and a sense of purpose, strength, that we've not really seen in the National Assembly before, but specifically on indigenous areas. So I don't think Laura's going to be one of those ministers where, you know, she's a poster girl at all. She's not. So Laura is tremendous in that regard. We have got out of Linden, I mentioned Devin Sears. We have out of Berbice, people on the current team course, Orielal, and I can go through the list. But we've got the talent.
You're contesting in all 10.
We have contested in all 10. Yeah. I don't know if you remember, people were saying weren't even going to make it to nomination day. So yes, we are contesting in all 10 regions, and we are campaigning in all 10 regions.
I know you hinted at this just now when you spoke about including persons, even those outside of the AFC. Should the AFC be elected to government? But I want you to expand a little bit more on the 5 to 10 year vision the party has for the country, focusing on addressing the issue of inclusivity, having a broader a government that represents all, because oftentimes we hear discussions and people feel as though some sections of society are being left out. So just help me understand a little bit more how you intend to address this issue of inclusive governance.
Okay, I'm happy you asked that. Our plans are a little longer than 5 to 10. We actually, when I was privileged enough to be elected, spoke about we have to have 10 to 15 and 15 to 20 year plans. And I picked 5 areas which the AFC immediately upon being elected would approach all the opposition parliamentary parties and some outside, of course, civil society, to establish 10 to 15 year plans. They would be in education. That is our number one topic. 2, the economy. 3, foreign affairs. 4, health. And 5, equally important, poverty reduction. And we would immediately, being elected, say to all the leaders of the various parliamentary parties, let's establish some broad principles in these 5 key areas which will survive electoral cycles. So 15 years, we're likely to have 3 elections. Let us agree that in education, this is our target. These are the goalposts that we set. We want to get matriculation across the country up to 85%. We want to have a highly technical, skilled population. And these are the basic parameters. Let's agree that, and then let's take that out of the political competition so that even if another party gets elected after us, those broad principles would be there.
Is it that you're concerned that there has been an issue of continuity where whenever there's a change of government, the program comes to a halt?
We shoot ourselves in our feet every time there's a change of political party. Valerie Lowe, God bless her beautiful soul, had a program in Region 1 in which it is 90% completed, and it got left, completely left, abandoned. She had a lapidary, completely left abandoned, purely for political reasons. A small country, small population, even less qualified people can't afford to abandon projects that are eminently sensible because of politics. So we have to agree this so that we don't suffer the kind of crises that we're suffering now. And somebody comes and does the same thing over again, rebrands it differently, and call it progress. Or it gets parked for 5 years, a new party goes in. We can't afford it. We don't have 20 million people, infinite resources, that we can afford to do that. We're small, we're talented, we are hemorrhaging at what, 70+% of our university students. Where are we going to start a project, government changes in 5 years, abandons that project, then start another project? That to me is lunacy. So for us, our entire approach is going to be an all-inclusive government. I'll give you an example by way of contrast. Other than the border, I don't know of a single occasion on which President Ali has consulted the official leader of the opposition, Mr. Norton, during the last 5 years, on particularly economic development, on approach to development, on approach to infrastructure. Nothing, no consultation. Mr. Norton represented in the National Assembly at least 49% of the population. If this is the approach that we envisage for the future, where we are intentionally excluding large percentages of our population, that's a recipe for disaster. And when underneath that is the race and ethnic tension, you are effectively setting the country up for failure. Because we know that we have a history of ethnic voting. We know that people tend to be influenced significantly by race. And therefore, you get your supporters and you get in and you decide you don't have to consult with the rest of the society, or you do some sort of cosmetic thing where you pick a leader here and you pick a leader there, pick somebody else, and they don't bring a following, and then say that you're somehow speaking for the country. That really is unacceptable. It's literally the building blocks for real problems.
The opposition parties have criticized the government of poorly managing the country's economy. So while the economy is booming, as they say, there's a feeling that the resources, the financial resources, are not managed properly, not going where they should go. Before we get to that economic question, though, I want you to address the issue of how would the AFC in government, should you be elected, address the issue of corruption. Because in order to manage the country effectively and manage its resources effectively, you definitely have to confront corruption. How would you improve transparency? Because these are issues that citizens are concerned about.
Sure. Corruption is, I think, the number 2 and number 3 issue after cost of living. Corruption is important, and to fight corruption, you need effective institutions. So let's just take one of the basic, the Integrity Commission. They just gather information and they do nothing with it. They don't have the power to investigate. They don't have funding to investigate. They don't have funding to prosecute. They don't have funding to engage multilateral financial institutions. We haven't set up the legislative framework for them to be able to harvest information about the tracking of money internationally and having that admissible in evidence in Guyana. We should establish bilateral treaties with the United States, with parts of China and other places, where if there's sufficient evidence of corruption and the money trail is there, people can be prosecuted, not only in Guyana, but they can be prosecuted in the United States once we provide the support. And therefore, the law enforcement agencies have to work and collaborate, because the monies that we have now in Guyana are in billions of US dollars. They just don't disappear into thin air. And they don't sit in bank accounts. Quite often they sit in investment portfolios, they sit in skyscrapers somewhere else. So we have to update our legislation. So the Integrity Commission needs to have a professional investigative arm, and we would urge initially that we hire the best forensic experts internationally, because they're going to be familiar with the ways and means that people hide money internationally and hide billions of dollars, not hide a couple of $100,000 US dollars, but hide real money. And they will be able to recommend the legislative framework that would allow us to trace that money, recover that money, because we don't want to prosecute people and don't get the money back. We want the assets because they took the assets that belong to the state. So that legislative framework has to be established. Anti-money laundering,
I was just going to ask about
Yeah.
that because I was wondering, I know over time, the country has updated, in a sense, strengthened the AML-CFT Act. Do you think
the
do you think that's
architecture, but
do you think that's sufficient?
they haven't peopled it. Again, if you look at it, the AML group, I don't know, 6, 7 people. If you track just the volume of monies that are unaccountable in the system, that are passing through the system, leading to a foreign currency crisis, you have to wait to get foreign currency to conduct basic business. That body should become a real forensic investigative arm that's going after criminal money anywhere it is. And that needs, again, the statutory and treaty framework to allow them to collaborate internationally. I'm just going to pick that find where they found $250 million US worth of narcotics in Essequibo with a submarine. That was done with the US government. That had no input. As a matter of fact, the head of the law enforcement here was surprised when he heard about it. Now, the basic technology is obvious. Satellite time is very cheap. There's no way you can fly a plane any part of this planet and it's not tracked. If we were serious about narcotics, that's what we would be doing, collaborating. We wouldn't have our friends have a crisis of confidence about sharing information with us. And after they found $250 million US worth of narcotics, no prosecutions in Guyana. Can't be a lack of evidence, because if you had enough evidence to identify it, you must have had enough evidence to identify who the players were that would lead you to a location where you can dig it up. And how does that amount of money enter the United States, and how is it distributed? How do people get paid? Because whoever is managing it here gets whatever commission. What's the flow? Is the flow payment in narcotics? Is it payment in arms? Is it payment in cash? All of that in this world today is not difficult to track. But we don't have the commitment here in Guyana. So that's another area. In the case of the Guyana Police Force, when you talk about corruption, there's so many examples of corruption. We have promised to establish an independent, citizen-led body responsible solely for the investigation, the prosecution of corruption in the Guyana Police Force. It is necessary. We will abandon this sense that the Guyana Police Force is capable of investigating itself. Absolutely not. It's like asking you to investigate your child. You're seriously going to investigate your child if the child can expose various things about it. So we will have a police commission, civilian-led, empowered to investigate. It will have the power to search, to seize, to go after records, access to records, not at the request of the Guyana Police Force, but mandatory powers to prosecute, to provide, most importantly, protection for witnesses, whistleblower protection. Up to now, the president hasn't signed it. It's over 10 years, where we can have those witnesses in various parts of the Caribbean and various parts of the world, depending on the sensitivity of the information they bring, so that they can testify against people who are involved in this level of corruption. That's what you have. You can't have a multi-billion US dollar country in revenues and not have the capacity to track and prosecute effectively, because we want to make sure that in our leveling up approach, that the people who are taking the resources of the country for their own personal benefit understand that you can't hide somewhere else. And for those countries who keep the money and keep the resources for these people, then you can't do business with us. So you can't be banking millions of illegally obtained dollars stolen from the country and still want to do business with us. So we will engage all our partners globally and say, look, we're open for business, we're open for international business, but understand we're also very concerned about you facilitating the plunder of the country through illegal means.
Address the issue of procurement. Oftentimes we hear concerns about the way contracts are issued. What would the AFC, what does the AFC plan entails?
Revamp the whole procurement system. I mean, how can you have two things, just two examples. How can you have a company with no experience, no history of building pump stations get a $900 million contract? How does the system allow that to happen? So clearly, whatever system we have has failed. How do you have somebody build the Heroes Highway, which is supposed to be a 15 to 20 year highway, and in less than 2 years, it's falling apart. Whoever approved the original design all the way through to wherever there were failures in the system, they've got to become accountable. And whether it's the supervisory level, whatever level that led to it. So the entire procurement system has to be changed. It also has to be accompanied by severe penalties when people breach it. We saw over the river that a company got $600 million over the engineer's estimate. How does that happen? How does a procurement system allow one company, which is building one of 8 lots on the highway, to get $600 million over the engineer's estimate? How does that happen? It means the system failed. And clearly the people who are in the system have demonstrated their incapacity, and the procurement laws have to change. We will use the best international practices to identify where those loopholes are. So we've had examples where 10-inch pipes are really ideally necessary, but somebody writes a procurement for 9-inch pipes, and there's only one person importing 9-inch pipes. So all of that has to be weeded out. And we don't have all the resources in Ghana, so we're going to hire people to come in to manage this process.
Let's talk about the economy. Since 2020, if my report is correct, Ghana would have raked in just over, I think, $1.3 trillion in revenues from the oil and gas industry alone. Now, the AFC said to foster economic growth and diversification, it will develop a diverse economy by investing in sectors such as agriculture, tourism, and renewable energy. Tell me more about this plan. Give me specifics.
Okay, sure. I perhaps the easiest way for me to do this is talk about our infrastructural plan by region. Okay. So, Region 1, all the way over on the western side. Region 1 has serious agricultural potential. We need to put a port in Region 1. One of the products that has had consistently high prices for the last 5 years of the world market is palm oil. We would encourage large and medium-scale palm oil production. The state will create the incentives or create the facilities for the harvesting of that, the storage of it, and the direct export of palm oil from Region 1. Whether we do it from Marijuana, the port at Marijuana, whether we put a port down in Kaituma is up the river, we can put one down and just behind Mabaruma. But we are going to develop in that region an international port where palm oil and other agricultural produce can leave the country directly. Set up, of course, customs in other facilities. Region 2. Most of the coconut water that's bottled in Trinidad, the coconuts actually come from Guyana. In Region 2, we will put down an international port at Charity. The Pomeroon River is the deepest river in the country. We will put down an international port, and then we will make sure that we have policies in place to increase the agricultural output. A lot of the farmers clearly don't have the capacity to farm as well as market, so the state is going to come in where it's going to make sure it grades and acquires their produce and exports it directly. So Charity will become a hub. Similarly, at Supanama, the other end of Region 2, we will make sure that we upgrade the facilities there, upgrade the ports, and we will, for soil content for rice to increase the yield in Region 2, have that done. Region 3, Parika. Parika to Goshen Road. Roll-on, roll-off ferry between Goshen and Bartica. That, everybody's spoken about that since the 60s. I think Chetty Jagan called it the Pan-American Highway. It's the link. We have to build the road facilities. Let me just go back to Regions 1 and 2. We're going to make sure that the road facilities linking Kaituma with Matthews Ridge, with Baramita, with all those places in Region 1 so that you can get in your car from Georgetown and actually get out to, if it's the Winey, the road network has to be built. Mr. Patterson has started a lot of that, and similarly in Region 2. But coming to Region 3, so Reed and Hope, we will again develop that port along with the port at Parika, the Goshen Highway, and we will make sure that Region 3, again, exports a lot of their produce directly from their port. Along the left bank of the Demerara River, upgrade the port facilities, because with the oil and gas development, it's going to take a while before we move the Berbice Bridge from where it is, because where it is stops any development along the banks of the Berbice River. Region 4, the crown jewel, many things. Region 4, we will make Durban Park the hub, the transportation hub for the country. It will be like the equivalent of a Grand Central. All the traffic coming from all the way to the East Coast, all the way from Criverton will come there. All the traffic coming from as far south as Lethem will come there. And then you'll have the East Bank, of course, feeder roads, feeder transportation buses that will feed Georgetown and the surrounding areas. We will put in light rail between Diamond and Georgetown, because this idea of adding 10,000 cars every quarter on the existing roadworks is crazy. It will reach to a place where you wouldn't have any movement. Light rail between Diamond and Georgetown, and light rail between Mahaica and Georgetown. High quality light rail so people can travel in safety and comfort. They can park their cars wherever they live and get on board and come to the city. They come to Durban Park, and then of course we will encourage and introduce big buses. And let me just share a statistic. Out of the UK, one big bus takes 85 cars off the road. One big transportation bus. So if you are running high quality air conditioned buses out of Georgetown, for every high quality bus you have, that's 85 cars off the road. People park that. We will establish outside of the Ministry of Public Works a Ministry of Transportation, because the transportation challenges we face, but more importantly, the transportation plans for the future of the country can be ad hoc. We can't decide, okay, we're putting a road to Wales and not look at the impact of it. It has to be studied, it has to have the data. The other thing about Region 4, at Clonbrook, we will establish an international port. Why that is important is because the future of this country will include the movement of goods from northern Brazil, which is landlocked at the moment, to an international port. Right now it takes 5 days for goods to move from Manaus to the Atlantic coast, not even to Miami, just to get up the Amazon, it's 5 days. It's 18 to 20 hours if you put that on a 40-foot truck, and once the feasibility is justified, you can put rail eventually. So certainly that port at Clonbrook. Why Clonbrook? Not a political reason. All the feasibility studies have said that the difference between the coast and the beginning, at the end of the continental shelf, is closest at Clonbrook. So you build that international port, which will put you in the deep water, and that will become the center of that form of development. So in Region 4 again, Center for Commercial Activity, we will upgrade to the highest international standards all the ICT facilities. Absolutely critical. And this is just infrastructure I'm talking about. Region 5. And the plans have been here.
I'm going to stop you
sure.
a bit.
Well, it's fine.
You could list a few more, but make it brief.
No,
because I have, yes, I know.
Go ahead. Go
so
ahead.
I know you have detailed plans.
Very detailed. And I haven't even got to education and the other things, but please, go ahead.
Yes, but I have quite a few questions, and I want to be able to go through them.
Want to. Forgive me for...
Not at all. I'm sure the viewers, they're learning more and more about the policies the AFC has for them. I want to talk about you mentioned education, and so I'm going to give you the opportunity to address education.
Stop me when I go on too long.
So the AFC has what it calls EduCare, and it says they were going to give $225,000 per child per year, free meals, free uniform, free school transportation. Now, the government, the PPPC, would have indicated that, in a sense, you're copying a lot of what they have already. In fact, when they talk about the cash grant for children, which is currently coined as the Because We Care cash grant, it has often accused the opposition, the coalition in a sense, of stopping this particular initiative in 2015. And so it's saying that, the opposition parties who are now jumping on this particular initiative are kind of hypocritical, because in 2015 it was halted, and look, now you're saying you're going to offer even more than they're offering. So what do you say to that?
Couple
While
of
you
things.
address
Sure.
education.
A couple of things. And this is just a principled position. If a policy is good and a party has it, I don't necessarily consider continuing the policy copying, and even if it's copying, why is that negative? Two, there's a huge difference between what we are talking about for education and the People's Progressive Party. The People's Progressive Party believes in giving cash, which is not a solution, because if the time the parent receives the cash, they have an economic crisis going on, that cash gets diverted from the purpose. The state is going to provide the buses, the boats, the tractors and the ATVs in the case of the interior to take the people to school. We're not giving the families money to pay for a minibus. No, the state is going to provide safe transportation for all students to get to school. Two, we are not giving the parents the money to buy the uniforms because, again, you run the risk that that money doesn't go to uniforms. The state is going to make sure that every kid gets its uniform. Most importantly, we don't want hungry children in school. So we're not giving the parents the money to go and buy lunch for their children, again, because it might end up there. The state is going to put in every school cafeterias that will have high content, nutritional value meals, not tennis roll and cheese straws and high content meals for a full balanced diet according to international standards. So we kill this 20% extreme food poverty and 40% food poverty, because that is going to be in the school, and every school will have high quality cafeterias. And in addition to that, we are still giving each parent $75,000 per child per term, which is the $225,000. So the parents also have the availability of cash. When it comes to the internet and resources, we are going to create an intranet for all schools throughout the country, which have access to all the educational material a student will need during their period in school. So whether they're in school in Rupununi or whether they're in school in Karibitan, they have access to it. And wherever they go, they have access. So we start to level up.
So that's part of the plan of bridging the divide as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just wanted to make it clear. The PPP's approach is give the people the money, and we know that people always have crises and the money doesn't go quite often to what it is. So the state is going to do that. So that's one of the big differences between ourselves and the PPP in relation to education and the approach to education. But it also, the trainers have to get trained, and there are all sorts of other issues in that regard. So I don't know if that addresses the question you had asked.
Yes, in part. Yes, it addresses
so what part,
It addresses the question, but I also want to hear some of the other education programs. I know I asked about the fiscal policies.
Oh no, sure, yeah.
But I want to hear about
okay.
The plans for education in general, outside of what you're going to offer parents and the students.
We are losing, and this is the Ministry of Education stat, 48% of our children are dropping out of secondary school. They're not completing. The modern economy in Guyana is going to be driven by oil and gas for the next 15 years to 20 years. To get a job in oil and gas, you have to be either skilled or semi-skilled, which means we're starting off with those 48% of the people who drop out of secondary school never being able to get a job in the oil and gas. So effectively, what you said to that 48% is they will become second-class citizens because they will never get those jobs. Two things about that. One, those jobs have to be filled 24/7 in the oil industry, so the foreigners will come in and fill that. And more foreigners will come and fill that while the Guyanese are not qualifying. So what we have brought into being is a thing called the National Skills Academy, which will give all those people who have dropped out of school, plus other people who have to be qualified, an opportunity to be trained in up to a year in relevant industries for the future in oil and gas. So whether it's harnessing, offshore welding, catering for offshore, all the offshore industries, we will train them. They will get certified at the end of the period once they pass the exams. But we understand that they have families to look after during that period. So we are actually going to pay them while they're being trained. So they don't have to sweat what's going on at home. And at the end of that, they have two options. We will either place them for jobs in those industries, in the oil and gas or construction, or if they want to go into business, we will give them the tools. So if they're in harnessing, we give them the tools for their harnesses. We will also, we know that not everybody can manage a business naturally. We will provide the financial assistance that will take them everything from a business plan to identifying red marks if the business starts to go offline, to make sure that for the first 2 years their hands are held, their payroll, they're putting aside for capital investment, and train them. So we will give you the fishing rod, and we will also teach you to fish. So that 48% now has a chance to be educated. It's what is called a modern voluntary national service. You go, you get trained, and you get a second chance. So we're not leaving you, oh, you didn't finish school and we leave you out there. That is vitally important. The existing technical institutes, the GTIs, the educational facilities, University of Guyana has to have a state-of-the-art research facility in engineering, because that's one of the professions of the future. We have to make sure that we elevate the quality of tutelage at UG to international standards by attracting international lecturers, presenters, and professors that come and live in Guyana in the fields that are relevant to our development. We have to create an institution that surpasses UWI, and UWI is way ahead of Guyana right now. And we have to make sure that you can only do that by allocating the resources, making sure the remuneration and salaries are at a level, and housing. Nobody's going to come to live in Guyana if your crime is high, if you don't have adequate housing. So we want to elevate all our educational institutions to world-class standards. That's a long-term program. You can't get that done in 5 years, excuse me. But the basis has to be there, and we have to get aggressive with recruitment. Lecturers and professors have to publish. We have to have international academic conferences here, presentations, so that we lift. UG campuses have to go to other regions. We have to have teacher training colleges. Apart from pouring more resources into training the teachers and, of course, salaries going up, we have to have those training facilities in Region 10, in Region 9. All of that has to go into building and leveling up the education. Not just that it gets better than where it is. Our target is that if you are in the Caribbean, your -- place for training in most disciplines, whether medicine, etc., must be Guyana, because it's contemporary, it's state-of-the-art, they're spending money in research, and it is globally accredited and recognized. That's what we're aiming at.
Mr. Hughes, the AFC says it stands with the men and women in uniform, and in saying that, it has released a number of I call fiscal measures or incentives for those men and women in uniform.
Fiscal and non-fiscal as well.
Non-fiscal as well, yes, because you have housing initiatives as well.
Absolutely critical.
So you're starting with $250,000 starting salary for all recruits, up to 100% salary increases across ranks from junior to senior officers, 2 months tax-free bonus. As well, I mentioned the housing arrangement as well. Free house lot for every member who turns 18 years old. And $10 million.
But that's across the board. That's not just for soldiers, yeah.
And $10 million to families if a member dies in the line of duty. And there are several others. What are the factors that influence, the AFC to come up with such policies?
Okay, so let me pick the Army first. We have a real threat, not an existential threat, on the border. If you look at military development these days, it's not large armies of people going through drills and putting men in the ground to march and invade. You still have to have that capacity. Warfare has gone to drones. If you think about it, somebody sits down in a room in California and takes out a village in Sudan. So the entire art of war has changed completely. So if we want to be able to protect our border, we have to have the capacity to be capable of deterring Venezuela with the state of art of war at the moment. So we have to have the capacity for drones. Most of the new warfare is technological. You can see that. People send disruptive viruses. So we need to recruit a different type of soldier. We need to recruit soldiers who are technologically extremely well advanced, precision weapons. I mean, I hate to use this example. Israel. The way in which, they're not doing it at the moment, but in which you can precisely target your enemy. So in building up our deterrent capacity on our western border in particular, we have to have close to the best technical skills available in the modern art of war. It's not boots on the ground, standing up on an outpost. That's going to be important, but it's the ability to be able to have the drones, manage that whole new technological. To do that, you need to have a higher level of recruit in terms of capacity, education, and what have you. People that have that capacity have the ability to earn higher salaries in the open market. If we want to attract and keep them in the Ghana Defense Force, we have to pay commensurate salaries. So that's why the salary has to be there, because it's the modern warfare. We have to have the capacity also in terms of the equipment that we use. And to be able to remain ahead of the curve, or at least understanding where the bridgehead of modern warfare is going, we need that level of skill at all levels of the Army. So when you go into the Army with an existing threat on the western border, we're saying housing. This is not just giving somebody a house lot. We are actually going to provide housing in what you would call medium to high income level housing developments that you'd find. So if you established a joint services scheme, a couple of basic things. It's going to have at least 10,000 acre per house lot. You're going to find they're going to be gyms, they're going to be parks, they're going to be walkways, they're going to be security features in there, so that someone understands that when they are giving their life and service to the country is providing them with the comforts, and they have no excuse possible for not delivering the highest. So they're going to be walkways, there probably be pools in some of these developments, because these are the people who are going to be responsible for defending our border in a modern state of war. Okay.
All right. So moving on, obviously for all the political parties, you often hear about incentives, better pension for the elderly people, parties are addressing VAT and so forth. Tell me a bit more on that before we move on to GCOM and the electoral processes.
Sure. Okay. So here's one of the things we have to be, well, let me say the AFC is wary about. We don't want to get into a competition of who's offering more money than whom. Because
it's a big competition right now.
We route our offers and the amounts we offer on economic advice. We have economists and universities that we consult with. So, for example, direct cash grants to citizens. Since June last year, I had announced that the direct transfers to citizens must come within a framework where we say we give 15%, 10%, whatever the economic panel recommends, 15 or 10% of the gross income from oil in any given year, we can do as a direct transfer. So if it drops, what you get is less. So I'm not committing to saying we're giving 200,000 or 100,000, because that is based on what the world market price is, and it must be dependent on the best economic advice. If the Economic Commission says it would gravely injure the economy of Guyana if we gave this 10% this year, then that decision which they gave to the Minister of Finance, I hope will be abided by, because we have the structures. So I'm not getting into a competition on that. What I will say, however, on a position of principle, giving somebody $100,000 or $200,000 is literally giving that money to the supermarket or giving it to the merchants. Because all you can do with 100,000 is you're going to buy a shirt. You can't invest that. There's not much you can be able to. You can't even buy a camera with 100,000 Canada dollars. We are recommending, and we will put this to the Economic Commission, a one-off first payment of somewhere around $1.5 million, which will allow citizens to invest in something tangible. If you have to upgrade your equipment, if you want to go into a different aspect of communications, you can actually take that and build your business. We're not just going to give it to you, but those who want economic advice as to how to spend it, that's fine. People will probably waste it as well. But it makes, for us, more sense that you get a significant sum in a one-off payment that allows you to invest it in real terms if you take it and put it in the stock market, whatever you do with it, as opposed to give you money that is never enough to invest, never enough to improve your business, that invariably will end up in the hands of the supermarkets and the consumables. So our approach is the Economic Commission makes the recommendation of what the standard percentage is. We figure it's going to be between 10 and 15% per year for direct transfers. Pensioners, they've already given, so we can give them a figure. Pension would be a minimum of 100,000, and then they're going to get everything from free medical, dialysis, drugs. All of that is going to be there because we begin again, unlike the PPP. The state must have state-of-the-art hospitals. So we're not giving you a cash voucher to go to somebody to get dialysis. That's just transferring money from the state to somebody in the private sector. The state has the capacity and the money, more than the private sector combined, to get state-of-the-art medical facilities. Look at Libya under Gaddafi. They had first world state-of-the-art health facilities in Libya provided by the state. So whether you had a minor ailment or a most complicated ailment, you can go into the state facility and get treated by the best medical experts. That is our approach.
With respect to the $1 million that you mentioned earlier, is this going to be per citizen or families? That's
no, per citizen. Let me explain to you, and you will remember the problems we had last year when they announced $200,000 per household.
Yeah.
You know the culture of Guyana. What is a household? Who is a household? You go into a yard that has 15 households. How are you determining who is a household? When I started to practice, there were 16, 17 people living in one room. Not all from the same biological parents, but that's were their economic circumstances. Why are we going to create that situation? It has to be per citizen. Winston Jordan is the person that pointed out that you're crazy to do it by the family. Do it by the individual.
How do you address inflation?
And
I ask the question because whenever there is a measure that sees citizens receiving some sort of cash incentive, then prices automatically
I think what you
go
mean
up.
is not inflation, cost of living.
Cost of living,
Yeah,
but
because the
inflation as
government
well,
says,
bringing down.
But if you see the problem with inflation, it depends on whose figures and what you use. The government says inflation is less than 4% because they're using figures and criteria which gives them 4%. I think the real issue in Guyana is cost of living. And there are several measures. I'm happy you've asked that. I'm going to give you an example. There's a difference between food production and access to food. A tomato probably costs, I don't know, $20 on the farm, whether it's grown in Perica or wherever. The second it gets to the market, it turns $100. So somewhere between the $20 at the farm and $100 in the market, some middle person is making a huge profit. So one of the areas to bring that price down is to bring down the cost of the movement of goods produced, or vegetables, food produced in Guyana, from the place of production to the market. So the government has to subsidize that. There are many ways you can do that. The government can either support, pay for trucks or whatever to bring that down. Because if it's $20 at the farm and we shut that down, you can actually get that tomato for $30. The farmer makes a $10 profit. The state provides the transportation, and even if you say you put in $5 for transportation per tomato, $35, as opposed to the $100 you're paying now, because it's just like, it's rapacious. Two, people are taking advantage of what they seem to be higher disposable income. So the government has to get into the business of buying basic items and selling them back at a reasonable profit. So that when people start to mark 800% up, the state is going to release the product onto the market, and it will bring the price down. Vouchers, we are going to give vouchers to the more vulnerable members of the society, and I just leave you with this last example because it's so long and I don't want to keep talking. Price of gas in the interior, the coast is I think $800 a gallon. I just came from Northwest. From Upper Mazaruni. The price of gas in Camarang and all those Upper Mazaruni communities is $2,500. So clearly the transportation from gas from Georgetown or the coast to the Upper Mazaruni is moving it from 800 to 2,500. The government isn't going to get into the business of moving that fuel to the interior. So the same $800 you get it for in the coast, the government will subsidize this transportation. The people in the interior will get it for $800 or $900. You imagine what difference that makes to every aspect of the cost of living for people living in the interior. They're no longer buying fuel at $2,500. They're buying it now at the same rate, $800 or $900. And all the government is doing is moving it from the coast to the interior. It's subsidizing it. So it will kill all those people who are literally plundering the people in the interior, because we can't afford to have our citizens exploited like that. So that's one of the cost of living measures that another one of them that we are going to bring in. And that will, of course, reduce the cost of production of food and agriculture, etc., in those areas.
You've spoken at length about policies, programs the AFC has. Based on the groundwork that you're currently doing, you've done already, and these policies and programs, how many seats do you anticipate the AFC would be able to garner following the September 1 elections?
You're asking me to play God. I'm not God. I don't even know if I'm making it into heaven. I can tell you, what I will say is that this is a new political climate in the country. You have candidates like Mr. Mohammed he has completely disrupted the existing political environment. He's exceedingly popular. He's had huge crowds. Nomination day, I think he had the largest crowd of all the parties. So you've got a lot of disruptive elements there. It's difficult to predict in a disruptive new environment how the cookie is going to crumble. So I wouldn't want to predict there and predict what we're likely to get. And anything else would be aspirational.
Now we're weeks away from elections. Are you satisfied with the preparations by the Ghana Elections Commission? We know that I think we're at the stage of the official list of electors now. Are you satisfied?
This must be the light moment at the end of the interview, right? Because you couldn't seriously be asking anybody if they're satisfied with GCOM. GCOM is a complete disaster. Absolute disaster. This election is going to, if it hasn't already, is going to demonstrate the complete unpreparedness of GCOM to hold a credible election. I mean, all the figures are there, all the signs are there. If you think about it, after the last crisis we had in 2020, several of the international agencies made recommendations. GCOM itself said to us, and has said internationally, they haven't implemented maybe one measure out of 40 or 20. How are you moving from 2020 to 2025 with all these recommendations? You've done one. No biometrics. There's no census. What, 700,000 voters? And we have 205,000 kids in school. So we have a population of 900,000 people, minimum. I don't think people really understand what is going on in the country. If you attempt to analyze this, you would realize that we are heading for real issues. You have two parties that have significant financial resources, and you have no campaign finance laws, none. So if you want to spend $1 billion putting scrutineers in all 3,000 plus polling stations, and the poor parties like us can't find scrutineers because we can't pay the money that the others are offering, how are you having a fair election with no campaign finance laws? Because you could find 10 people to give you $1 billion. Nobody asks about the source of that money, where it's coming from, what influence they're buying. And you have a system where the government penalizes people for supporting anybody other than the government. What you had? You had a policeman transferred because he shook the hand of a candidate. The other day, a bank fires somebody because his name is on the list of some party. What are we talking about here? Free and fair election? No, GCOM is this. We are. I would say, if from an entertainment point of view, if it wasn't so tragic, it really would be high value entertainment.
Are you concerned about vote buying?
Of course, if you don't have campaign finance legislation, what is going to happen? People are going to buy votes. If you're allowing people to take cell phones into the polling station, you are saying, go ahead, buy my vote, because the only verification the person who is buying the vote has that you have voted in a particular way is if you send them a picture of you marking the X next to the party that you have paid them to vote for. Now, if you were serious about vote buying, people wouldn't be allowed to take their cell phones into the polling station. But the excuse they give is absolutely phenomenal. What do they say? Oh, they're concerned about the safety of the phone outside. Seriously? If you leave your cell phone with the PO and you come back out and the PO don't have your cell phone, we're gone. I mean, we're seriously not serious as a country. So vote buying is, clearly GCOM has said buy the vote. Because they can now take the photograph and say, look, I voted for you, Roadrunner. Here's my X, here's my thing. Can I now have my 100,000 or whatever? I don't know what the current price is to buy votes.
No, after the 2020 elections, we had some legislative changes, according to the government, who would have piloted those bills through the National Assembly. The intention, for example, with the Representation of the People Act, was to strengthen the legislative framework governing our electoral system. Are you saying that with a serious way? Electoral system.
Okay.
Are you somewhat comforted with those amendments and legislative changes?
I'm not supposed to ask journalists questions. Are you serious? Let me just take one of them. The geographic, the 2022 Act, they've removed the geographic requirement. So before, Svetlana Marshall would have been attached to a specific address, 10 Water Street, Georgetown. So GCOM would have done, when they're conducting an audit, would have looked at your name, and they would have gone to 10 Water Street
and
verified that Svetlana Marshall is living at 10 Water Street or has some relationship. They changed the law to this. Svetlana Marshall, 10 Water Street. We don't have to check to see if there's any connection. We just have to see if 10 Water Street exists at all. That's what the change says. It's removed any requirement of a connection between you and 10 Water Street. So they just have to verify that if you say you live in 10 Canary Street.
Even if it's an empty lot.
Even if it's an empty lot. Better yet, if it doesn't exist. So I ask you this. There are no house lots in any indigenous community in this country. None. There's no lot 10 Philippi. There's no lot 5 Anai. There are no house lots. So all you say is Svetlana Marshall, Anai. So Anai exists. End of story. That is what the change of law did. And it's frightening. In people working in the interior, you're working at a landing. There are no lot 5, 10 mile, 5 mile. So there's nothing that has to be verified.
But the argument put forward by the government that this was needed, the legislative changes that were made, particularly with regards to the residency requirement or the the need for none to be there, is in keeping with what the Constitution requires, that it doesn't call for the addresses, or it doesn't ask for that.
Two things. We have a top-up and a regional list, right?
I'm fully aware, and this matter went to the courts, as you are aware as well.
And regional means that you got to come from the region, right? At a very basic level. How are we verifying where you come from when you go to vote, the candidates?
Well, the court rule.
I'm sure it has, and it's on the appeal. Two, the Constitution says that the party that gets the most votes gets all the executive powers in the Constitution. So if you get 25% of the vote, and there are 10 parties that get 24, 23, 22, and 21, you with your 25% of the vote, of people that voted for you, get 100% of the executive power. And effectively, since the CCJ decision, you will never be voted out for no confidence vote, because the CCJ position is that every member of parliament has to attend parliament to vote on a no confidence vote. So unless you are a class A retard, if there's a no confidence vote, your MPs won't turn up. So effectively, there's no confidence vote in the future. None. So you can rule with your 25% of the vote with 100% of the executive power for 5 years. So the Constitution says that. So I hear you. But in a multi-ethnic society with 25% of the vote, you think you're getting stability for the next 5 years? Because the Constitution says this is possible?
Now, you earlier mentioned about some parties' ability to field polling agents across the country because they have the resources to do so, and some parties do not have the resources. Are you comforted by the high presence of foreign observer missions here? At least for the EU, they have repeatedly said they're feeling about 50. And the US also indicated that they are also feeling 50, and you have other foreign observer missions coming in and feeling observers. Are you comforted by that?
Remotely, absolutely not. And I will say this. You have 3,000 polling stations and you got less than 100 or 100 observers. How are they covering these polling stations? And let me give you a classic example. If you are in Baitoun in Region 9, very small indigenous community, which observer is going to be in Baitoun in Region 9 at the close of poll where you can't get back to Lethem that night? It's remote. If you are a citizen, your government is going to say that that is a high-risk area to be in. Now, in Baitoun, if a party steals 5 votes, and they steal 5 votes at all the remote polling stations in Region 9, and wherever else they exist, in the Upper Maz, whether they're in PK or Kurukubaru, 5 votes per polling station, because we know that no foreign observer is going to be left in a remote indigenous community in this country. They're not observing it. And you steal 5 votes per polling station because there are no scrutineers, there's nobody else from any other party, and the observers are not there, you would have bought yourself at least 2 seats, minimum. So the number of the observers, 100 compared to 3,000 polling stations, what are they doing? And they're not going to remote areas. They're going to concentrate themselves in Region 4, they're going to go to Lethem and say they were in Region 9. If you go to Region 9, you know. Classic example, Rewa. Rewa is 2 hours up from Quataman, which is Anai. Or you go to Apateri. Who's being stuck there? Alligator-infested river. You can't take off in the night because there's no runway. And none of the interior runways operate at night. I had a heart attack, I can tell you. The people had to come out and put lights at the side of the runway. Which foreign agency, particularly a foreign government, is going to put any citizen in a position where if they got sick, naturally, they can't get them out? It's too high a risk. No insurance policy is going to provide them with the coverage. So it effectively shuts down any monitoring of those areas, because you have to monitor during the day the vote and you have to monitor the count. So if you are in Rewa, you got to stay till the next day. If, God forbid, you get a heart attack during the night, helicopter can't come for you. There's no runway. So which insurance company is covering any one of those observers to be in that location? None.
What could be done at this stage to ensure there's free and fair election?
It's going to be difficult. I mean, my personal view, it's going to be very difficult. We just don't have the framework. JCOM doesn't have the capacity, and there are too many opportunities for unorthodox practices.
Finally, what would you say to voters, eligible Guyanese, who are still contemplating whether they should, vote in these elections? Why should they vote for the AFC?
Well, before we come to the AFC, this is perhaps, and I know people say this at every election, it is the most important election. Because if you don't think it's an important enough election for you to get up and vote, and you see the biased nature and manner in which the resources of this country are being allocated, if you're not in that very small circle, to your disadvantage, and where the economic structures are being set up that you will never have a chance in the future, where the World Bank has said that there is 40% food poverty for children, 20% extreme food poverty after 5 years of commercial production of oil. And if that is not enough for you to get up and vote, then you are, by your action, removing any privilege to complain about anything that happens to your future or the future of your children. It is that critical. In terms of the Alliance for Change, this is a new era. I believe we have the most progressive policies. If the reaction of the other parties is anything to go by, they've all been adopting our policies. We were the first to say light rail, all of a sudden the PPP say light rail. We're the first to say every 18-year-old must get a house lot. Other parties are saying every 18-year-old must get a house lot. We're the first to say develop 10 to 15-year plans. Everybody is talking about that. We were the first to say in July last year, direct transfers to the citizens. The vice president at the time said it was foolishness and stupid and it wasn't sustainable. What happens? The same vice president and his party goes and says direct transfers to the citizens. So we are confident that we are the original. If you want original thought, and if you want the people who are capable of original progressive thought, AFC. If you want somebody who is going to copy and try and adopt it and present it as theirs, then you have the rest. And the most important thing for the future for me is that you want somebody who is capable of original thought, original analysis, and who is going to be able to be all-inclusive. We have started off by saying we don't want to rule alone. The PPP has ruled to the exclusion of everybody else other than when the border is in crisis. We are the ones that are saying we need the broadest based government with the longest possible plans. And that's where we stand. And we stand and fall by it.
Mr. Hughes, thank you so much for joining me on this edition of Sources. I wish you and your party all the best. And with that, we've come to the end of this edition of Sources. I've been your host, Svetlana Marshall.